Welcome to Motherhood and ADHD. I'm your friend, Patricia Sen. My mission is to be a lighthouse for mothers with ADHD, helping you find your path to success by learning to appreciate your ADHD as an asset. I'm seeking to change the paradigm that ADHD means your life is doomed to be a hot mess. So I'm sharing strategies and encouraging you in your pursuit of happiness to love who you are every day of your ADHD life. Hey there, Successful Mama. It's your friend Patricia. I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you for listening. This week I was listening to, or watching, I guess, one of the free webinars that is offered by Attitude Magazine. And if you haven't had a chance to connect with those, they do one about once a week and they're on all kinds of different topics. So you can sign up for them live and ask questions, and you can go back and watch tons of previous webinars. So if there's something that you really are curious about, you can go in and look, see maybe they have a topic on that. So it's a pretty cool free resource. And I'll link to that on the show notes if you want to take a peep instead of Google searching. Obviously, that works too. But the recent one that I was watching, so let me pull it up here. It was called Getting Things Done, ADHD Friendly Productivity Strategies for Adults with ADHD. And I quite enjoyed it because she actually touched on a lot of productivity theories that we hear a lot about that are like super popular. And it's funny because she actually was talking about one of them that I just finished the book called Eat That Frog. The lady's name is Linda Walker. And while she doesn't have ADHD, her husband does. So she has experience in her family and home life on what to do with ADHD adults. So I like how she was very clear that we can't necessarily do things the same way that neurotypicals do. Sometimes we can, but other times that's just an unreasonable expectation. So we need to modify those things to fit our personalities and the way that our brain functions. So going back to that example of Eat That Frog, I really liked that book. I generally liked the way that he approached things. And his concept is that you eat the ugliest and most horrible task first, just get it over with, and then you move along to the other items because you gain momentum. Well, that's really hard for us for when you have ADHD. A lot of times taking on that big, the ugly frog task is overwhelming. So it actually works better for us to do a few like small victories first. And then once we get rolling, then we could eat the frog. So like the concept overall works. We just have to modify it to fit us. And I think that's hard a lot of the times to know how we can modify those things. So I liked what she was talking about. And she made this like kind of offhand remark about how the KonMari method doesn't work for ADHD. And I was like, oh, no, because if you've known me for like 5 seconds, you know how much I love Marie Kondo and her entire philosophy on cleaning out your house. It has been such a lifesaver for me. It has really lightened my load and I love it. But I felt like when she made that comment, it was like a little bit limiting. And I felt like she needed to apply almost her, her thought process on modifying other things to make it work. I think we can still do that with the KonMari method, is just breaking it into smaller pieces. And so she had talked about in her webinar about prioritizing by project instead of just having this big giant list. And I feel like if we apply that method to the KonMari method, we can make it work for us. So if you think about, you always hear those sayings of like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, or like, how do you run a marathon? One step at a time. When we break down those projects into little pieces, like one bite or one step, it makes it a lot more doable. But the problem is we're very like all or nothing people. Like either we're going to clean all the things or we clean none of the things. We want to take all of the classes or we want to take none of the classes. It's really hard for us to break them down into those baby steps at face value. So that's a skill that I think as a whole, people with ADHD, if we work on that, it really does add a lot of value to our life. That's a really great life skill for us. The other problem when you tackle a big project is a lot of times we get frustrated and overwhelmed when you get like halfway or 2/3 into that project. Then it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot do this anymore. Like we just want to give up. And then for me, I also forget about the closing process. So like the wrap up and the like putting away of things just isn't on my radar. And so I have to remind myself that like a project isn't finished until I've done every single step. So lining out those steps or dividing up the project into those little pieces is a way to make those elephants seem a lot more doable. So I'm going to call them the itty bitty projects, because if we can get done an itty bitty project, that's a great win. You don't have to devote like your entire Saturday to cleaning out the garage, because we all know what happens is we get all the junk pulled out and we get about half of it sorted and then we're pooped. And we don't want to finish, and we end up just like shoving everything back in, and you end up with more of a mess than when you started, and then you don't end up circling back to that for months. So if we can break it into tiny projects, so just an itty bitty project, be happy that you got that itty bitty project done. Throw yourself a little dance party, treat yourself to something. We don't have to conquer the world in order to be proud of ourselves. We can conquer something little, because if you conquer a whole lot of little things, eventually you can conquer the world. So learning to write out the steps is just something you figure out with practice. So what I like to do is write out all the pieces of a project and then have someone look at it for me. Preferably somebody who's good at that. Like, don't just pick anybody because they're not going to be helpful. Pick a friend that would be good at whatever you're trying to do. So for example, when I look at the KonMari method, her recommendation, and I'm probably going to do a whole episode on KonMari because I just adore her little self. She's just wonderful. And by the way, I don't feel like the Netflix special really did it justice. I feel like it didn't dive in enough to understand the background of it, and that's probably why I'm going to end up doing an episode on it. But anyways, I don't want to digress too far. So when you start her process, the first thing you tackle is your clothing. And in her method, you literally take every single piece of clothing you own and you dump it into a giant pile. And that is super overwhelming. Now, if you can tackle this like with a friend who's going to be there with you, cheering you on the whole way to get it done to the completion line, hey, go for it. But if that's not reasonable, then how can you break that down into little bitty projects? So from the start is gathering your supplies, which I always forget about. It's like I start a project and I'm like, oh, I don't have a box to put the donation stuff in. Like start from literally like, not step 1, but like step 0, I guess. Do you have a box for donations? Do you have a trash bag? Do you have a space cleared out that you can work? Then you can sort the items into categories. So, with a quick Google search, you can pull up a Pinterest pin or, an image on Google that lines out exactly the order of things from her method. And it starts out in clothing, and then the first subcategory is tops. And if pulling all your tops out at once is too overwhelming, then just do off season. So you can break it down in just that tiny part of, okay, let's pull out all the winter tops and just sort those. So hopefully you're only dealing with like 30 or 40 shirts rather than like 200 shirts. The other part that I love about the KonMari method, which I think is good for ADHD, is that once you've sorted out everything, she goes back and does the organizing at the end. So your job is just to sort through all those winter shirts, and then you put them back where they were. You don't have to organize them in a new way or find a new home for them. You sort them and then you put them right back where they were. If you think about how you could do these little pieces one at a time, you can slowly get through cleaning out your closet. If you say, okay, tomorrow I'm cleaning out socks, like really, how long is it going to take you to clean out your socks? Even if you're super indecisive, probably isn't going to take you more than 30 minutes. Really, it probably will take you like 5-10 minutes to go through your socks. So don't look at the overall scheme of how it's going to take you like a month to clean out your closet. That's okay. This project is a mindset of having only what you need and love. You don't have to solve the problem right now. And she says in her book, like, this is probably going to take you about a year. For me, it's taken me almost 3 years because I had a baby in between. I powered through for like 10, 11 months. And then I finished work on a Monday and my son wasn't due for 2 more weeks. And then he was born on Tuesday. Well, all of the hopes and dreams I had of getting these like nice to have things done clearly did not get done. And then I realized that was probably a blessing in disguise, because does a 9-month pregnant lady really need to be going through sentimental items? No, I did not need to be doing that. So I took a year break. I didn't go back to finishing my sentimental items until after my son was already a year old. And I'm okay with that. Like, that was a time in my life where this was not an appropriate goal or priority. And it was okay to just push pause and pick it up later. And I've gotten through most of it. Like I still have, again, that cleaning up process. Like I have these sentimental items sitting in a box of the things that I wanted to keep, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do with them. So they're just sitting in a box in my office right now. But overall, my house is so much more calm and peaceful. And I need to get off my KonMari soapbox for a minute and go back to my topic, which is breaking it down to those tiny pieces. So it's taken me a long time to get through this project, but I did it in pieces. I did little bitty projects along the way so that I could get to my end goal. And so I want you to just think about, what is a project that you haven't wanted to take on because it just seems too overwhelming? Write out all the steps you can think of, literally from step 0 of like gathering everything you need in order to tackle the project, each step you're going to need to do. And then have somebody you trust, whether it's a friend or a coworker, whoever would be like knowledgeable person to be your sounding board, and have them look it over, see what you forgot. And this is that learning process where you're going to see, okay, well, you know what? I forgot to think about getting boxes for my donations or taking that trip to the donation center to drop off the donations. And then in the next week, I want you to tackle just one of those itty bitty projects. It doesn't have to be one a day. Like just pick one little piece of that project to get started on. And that momentum, as you get used to doing the itty bitty projects, will grow and you'll start to see the difference over time. We'll get there. We'll get there one little itty bitty project at a time. So successful mama. Know that we can do difficult things. We can do overwhelming things. We just have to adjust them a little bit to fit our brains and our season of life that we are in as a mother. And we can still make it happen. It just has to be done in a different way on a different schedule. All right, successful mama, I'm so glad you were here. I hope you got a little motivation from trying something in a new way. If you've been listening for a little while, I would love for you to give us a review on iTunes. If you just scroll down to the bottom of the iTunes app, you can hit those 5 stars. It's really easy. You don't have to write anything if you don't want to, but if you do, I would love to read your review on the next episode. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your day with me. All right, successful mama, have an amazing week, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Motherhood in ADHD. For more resources, head over to our website, www.motherhoodinadhd.com.